I found out I had a secret son after my wife died, and what he revealed about my daughter's lies blew my whole life apart. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. My name is Martin Hale. I'm 73 years old, a retired architect, a widower, and a grandfather of 2. Until last year, I would have told you I'd lived a good, full life. Not perfect, no life is, but solid. I was married to my wife, Margaret, for 42 years. We built our life brick by brick, a modest home in the suburbs, 2 successful children, and more Sunday dinners than I could count. We had our rough patches, sure. Margaret and I argued about money, politics, my stubborn habits, her sharp tongue. But we always found our way back to each other. I used to say we had the kind of marriage you could lean on, even when the world leaned back hard. Our daughter Julia was the organized one, always planning ahead, always managing things. She took after Margaret. Assertive. Brilliant. Sometimes too clever for her own good. Our son, Andrew, died in a car accident at 24. I do not speak much about that part of my life, because there are losses words do not know how to carry. His death changed all of us. Still, Julia married, gave us 2 grandsons, and called every Sunday without fail. When Margaret got sick, cancer, cruel and fast, Julia stepped in like a second mother. Arranged hospice care. Cleaned out hospital bills. Held my hand at the funeral and said, "We're still a family, Dad. You still have us." And I believed her. For months after Margaret passed, I found purpose in small things, fixing the fence, organizing old photos, learning to cook meals that didn't come frozen. Julia checked in often. She even brought me groceries and set up a medication reminder app on my phone. If someone had asked me then what I thought of my family, I would have said they were loyal. Close. Solid. But everything changed, all of it, the day I picked up the phone and heard a stranger say, "I think I'm your son." The call came on a Wednesday morning, the kind of morning where nothing feels urgent. I just finished my second cup of coffee, flipped on the news, and was half listening to a segment about retirement scams when the phone rang. "Mr. Hale?" a voice asked. Not a telemarketer. Not a robocall. A man, calm, steady, polite. "Yes," I replied. "My name is Gabriel Finch. I believe I may be your son." I laughed, just lightly. Not mocking, just startled. "You've got the wrong Martin Hale, son." "I don't think I do, sir," he said gently. "My mother's name was Rachel Finch. She passed away last year. She told me the truth before she died. I've been trying to work up the nerve to call you since." My chest tightened. I knew the name, Rachel. We'd dated for a few months in college. Nothing serious. I remembered a wild laugh and sharp wit, the kind of girl who always looked like she had one foot out the door. We lost touch. Life moved on. "You're saying, she told you I'm your father?" I asked slowly. "Yes. And I had a DNA test done. I didn't want to reach out until I was sure." Silence hung between us. "I'm not calling for money. Or attention. I just want to talk. That's all," he added. I agreed to meet him the next day, at a little cafe 2 towns over. Not the kind of place Julia or her friends would frequent. I didn't want questions. Not yet. Gabriel was already seated when I arrived. He stood when he saw me. Same height. Brown eyes like mine. He even had my lopsided grin, the one my wife used to tease me about when I was trying to lie about eating the last cookie. We sat. He slid an envelope across the table. Inside were documents, the DNA report, old photos of Rachel, hospital records. Even a letter, written in shaky cursive. Martin was kind. Decent. He never knew about you because I never told him. That was my mistake, not his. Please find him. She'd written it with weeks to live. Gabriel watched me read it, not pushing, not nervously searching my face for a reaction. I kept flipping through the papers, my hands trembling. How old are you? I asked. 40, he said. Born in 85. I did the math. It checked out. I'm sorry, I said, swallowing something bitter and warm. I didn't know. If I had. You couldn't have, he interrupted gently. She didn't want to ruin your life. That's what she told me. But she also said, your wife knew. Years later. I looked up. Excuse me. Gabriel nodded. She didn't say how. But she said Margaret knew. My blood went cold. Margaret had kept many things close to the vest, finances, feelings, fears. But this? And then Gabriel said something else. She also said your daughter knew. That they talked about it once. That Julia said it was best to leave things alone. That it would only create problems. I sat very still. That was the moment something shifted. Not just the past, my present cracked. The daughter who held my hand at the funeral. Who brought me groceries and cleared out her mother's closet. Who'd once said, you still have us. She knew. She knew I had a son out there. And she chose silence. The cafe emptied out slowly around us, but I stayed seated long after Gabriel had gone. We shook hands, no tears, no dramatic reunions. He gave me space. I appreciated that. But as I sat alone, the questions multiplied. Why did Margaret keep this from me? At first, I told myself she'd been scared. That maybe she'd found out long ago and didn't know how to tell me. Maybe she thought it would wreck our marriage or reopen doors best left shut. But Margaret was not afraid of confrontation. That woman once took on a crooked contractor in small claims court without blinking. She read every legal line in our mortgage, argued with doctors when I refused to, and negotiated car prices like she'd trained in hostage negotiation. No, she wasn't afraid. She was deliberate. If she found out about Gabriel, and based on that letter, she did, then she made a decision. Not just to keep him away from me, but to make sure I never had the chance to know he existed. That wasn't protection. That was control. And if she did it alone, maybe I could live with that. Maybe I could chalk it up to jealousy, insecurity, pride. We were complicated people. We had secrets. But Julia? That truth cut deeper. My daughter. My only surviving child. The girl I stayed strong for after Andrew died. The one I taught to ride a bike, to balance a checkbook, to parallel park without hitting the curb. Why would she keep something like this from me? I ran through every scenario. Maybe Margaret told her late in life, and Julia didn't think it was real. Maybe she assumed it was a mistake, a rumor, a ghost from the past not worth chasing. But the more I replayed the timing, things Gabriel had said, Margaret's behavior near the end, even a strange offhand comment Julia once made about keeping the family small and simple, the more the puzzle began to form a darker shape. They knew. And they made sure I didn't. Because adding Gabriel to the picture would have changed everything. My will. My estate. The inheritance. The balance of power. Julia had always been sharp. From her teenage years, she calculated angles most adults missed. She picked up on subtext, controlled conversations. She used concern like a leash, gentle, but taut. And after Margaret died, that leash tightened. It started small. She helped me organize the bills. Cleaned out Margaret's files. Offered to set up auto payments for the utilities. I appreciated it. Grief fogs everything. Her help felt like a gift. But then she insisted I move my accounts into a joint family trust, just in case something happens, Dad. She pushed for me to get rid of the house, too many stairs, Dad. It's not safe anymore. She started managing my calendar, my prescriptions, my insurance claims. All under the banner of love. All framed as care. But underneath it, something had changed. The warmth was still there, but it was thinner. Calibrated. Like a dial she turned on or off depending on whether I agreed with her suggestions. And slowly, I began to feel like a guest in my own life. I didn't accuse her. Not at first. I smiled when she visited. I thanked her for the soup. I let her talk about refinancing options and long-term care policies and streamlining my estate. But I started listening differently. I paid attention to what she didn't say. I dropped a casual line over coffee, funny, I was going through some old photos from college. Ran across the name Rachel Finch. You remember me talking about her? She froze for half a second. Not long. Just long enough. Then came the shrug. Doesn't ring a bell. She took a sip of tea, but her eyes were too focused on the mug. Too carefully avoiding mine. That was test number 1. Test 2 came a week later. I told her my lawyer had called me, a lie, and said we should probably revisit the will now that Margaret was gone. Her response. Immediate. Oh, I already talked to Mr. Halpern, she said. He said it's all squared away unless you want to change beneficiaries. We can take care of that together if you'd like. We. That word told me everything. Julia had her fingers on the strings. Not just legal, financial. Maybe more. Margaret must have left her some kind of authority or paperwork I didn't know about. And now, with my grief fogging things up, she had taken over the theater. But I hadn't forgotten how to run a stage. I scheduled a private appointment with Mr. Halpern. Not through Julia, through an old number I still had in my filing cabinet. He looked surprised when I walked into his office unannounced. Martin, he said, standing up. I thought we were all set. Apparently we are, I said. According to my daughter. But I'd like to review everything myself. He hesitated. And that hesitation told me plenty. Turned out, Julia had been in contact with him multiple times over the last few months. Always, on my behalf. Always with verbal approval. She'd arranged a draft of a revised will that cut out any unnamed descendants, a clause she insisted was just legal housekeeping. Housekeeping. Gabriel would have been erased before I even had a chance to acknowledge him. I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I just asked Mr. Halpern to draft a brand new will, private, sealed, and with language so tight Julia wouldn't be able to poke a hole in it with a bayonet. Gabriel would be included. Named, with full rights. Then I started taking inventory. All the accounts. All the assets. Everything Julia thought she had mapped out already. And I moved them. Some to new banks. Some to trusts in Gabriel's name. Some overseas, where she wouldn't even know they existed. I sold a rental property she believed I still owned. Donated another to a non-profit in Margaret's name, publicly, with press coverage. Julia called that night, her voice sugar-slick but stretched. "Dad, are you okay? I saw the article online. I just wish we could have discussed that kind of thing first." "I didn't think it mattered," I replied mildly. "You said you wanted me to simplify." The silence that followed was heavy, and for the first time, I felt her mask slip just a little. I wasn't just testing her anymore. I was winning. It didn't take long for Julia to realize something had shifted. She showed up unannounced one morning, holding a box of pastries and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You've been busy, Dad," she said as I let her in. She wasn't talking about gardening or crossword puzzles. I nodded. "Just tying up a few loose ends." We sat in the kitchen, the one she used to do her homework in, and I watched her scan the room like she was cataloging assets. Her eyes lingered a beat too long on the antique clock, the framed war medals, the hand-carved hutch Margaret loved. "I worry about you," she said suddenly. "You've been unpredictable lately." Unpredictable. That was the word people use right before they take away your freedom. "You've made some very big financial decisions without consulting anyone," she continued, voice sliding into that clinical tone she uses when talking to contractors or bank tellers. "I spoke with a lawyer. There are ways we can protect your independence, while also ensuring no one takes advantage of you." My spoon clinked gently against my coffee mug. "Are you suggesting someone's trying to take advantage of me?" She hesitated. "I'm suggesting you might not be in the best position to make long-term decisions. Especially not with strangers involved." There it was. Gabriel, the stranger. And then she pulled out the envelope. A formal petition. Drafted. Signed. Ready to file. She was petitioning for guardianship. She wanted legal control over my finances, my medical decisions, even my residence. She had already contacted my primary care physician, citing cognitive concerns. She had spoken with a court liaison. She was planning to file within the week, all under the pretense of protecting me. I looked at her across the table, this grown woman who used to cry when I kissed her scraped knees. She wasn't crying now. She was winning. In her mind, anyway. "Julia," I said quietly, "do you think I've lost my mind?" "No," she said too quickly. "Not lost. Just slipping." I smiled. "Then you'll understand why I'd prefer to handle things myself. For now." Her eyes narrowed, but she nodded, slowly. But in that moment, we both knew, the war had begun. That night, I sat on the back porch with Gabriel. He'd brought over dinner, nothing fancy, just takeout from a little Thai place. We ate quietly. The cicadas were singing, and the sky was a bruised blue fading into night. "She's trying to take control of everything," I told him. "Medical. Financial. Even the house. He shook his head. I don't want any of it, Dad. I just wanted to know you. I believed him. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a broken man trying to survive grief. I felt like a father again. The day after Julia handed me the guardianship papers, I still needed air. I called Gabriel. Got plans today? I asked. Not if you need me, he replied. We met at a trailhead just outside town. Nothing steep, just a winding path through pine and cottonwood, where the air smelled like bark and distant rain. Gabriel brought 2 walking sticks. He handed me one without a word. For a while, we walked in silence, the kind that doesn't feel awkward, the kind where something good is growing quietly between 2 people who didn't know they needed each other. I used to take my daughter on walks like this, I said eventually. When she was small. She'd get tired and ask to ride on my shoulders. Gabriel smiled. Sounds nice. It was. And I don't know when that version of her disappeared. Maybe I missed it while trying to hold the family together. He looked ahead. You didn't miss it. Some people just decide to become someone else. We stopped at a clearing. The creek ran low this time of year, but its sound still softened the edges of everything. You've been calm about all this, I said. Even when you found out what they did, keeping us apart. Gabriel nodded. I was angry. Still am, some days. But I got to meet you. That's more than I expected. He sat on a flat stone, elbows on his knees. You don't owe me anything, Dad. Not money, not a house, not some formal recognition. I'm not here for the past. I'm here if you want a future. That sentence landed in my chest like a warm, heavy weight. He wasn't trying to take anything from me. He was giving me something I thought I'd lost, family that felt real again. That night, I started preparing the reveal. The real reveal, the one Julia wouldn't see coming until it was carved into court records. First, I met with Mr. Halpern again and finalized the new will, airtight, signed and notarized. Gabriel listed as an heir. Julia's share revised. Medical power of attorney removed. All accounts locked under separate authorizations. Then I pulled the trigger on the final move, I sold the house. Quietly. Legally. Fast. Not through a listing Julia could trace, I used a trusted friend from the architecture days, who specialized in private sales. He knew a couple looking to retire. No signs. No online listing. Just paperwork. The house Julia was circling like a vulture. Gone. I didn't need it anymore. Margaret was in the garden, in the walls, in the light of the old windows, but not in the title deed. Not anymore. I closed on a new property 2 states away. Smaller, quieter. The kind of place where porch chairs matter more than square footage. And I added Gabriel's name to the title before I ever set foot on the driveway. Everything else, the accounts, the safety deposit box, even Margaret's jewelry, was already transferred or locked. And then I wrote 2 letters. One for Julia. One for the potential judge. A week passed after I sold the house. I waited. I knew Julia wouldn't stay quiet long. The call came on a Thursday morning. Dad, she said sharply, skipping pleasantries. There's something wrong with the bank accounts. I sipped my coffee. Is that so? They're frozen. I tried to set up the trust transfer and, Dad, did you change something? I did. A pause. Then her voice dropped into that sharp, no-nonsense tone I remembered from her debates in high school. Why would you make changes without talking to me? Because you made decisions without talking to me, I said. Like speaking to a lawyer about taking over my life. That was a bold move. Silence. She tried to recover. I was trying to protect you. You've been erratic. This man showing up out of nowhere, and now you're selling properties, moving money. His name is Gabriel. And he's my son. Your half-brother. I don't believe that. I know you don't, I said calmly. Because believing it would mean admitting you knew the truth years ago and buried it. Like your mother did. Her breath caught. Just for a second. I don't know what he's told you, she began, but I cut her off. I don't need him to tell me. I have the DNA tests. The letter your mother wrote before she died. And the updated will. Which you are no longer part of in the way you imagined. That part landed. I could feel it. You rewrote the will. I did. With a lawyer you haven't spoken to. One who knows how to file the right paperwork without leaking it to controlling daughters. You can't just, Dad, I'm your only family. No, I said. I'm looking at my son right now. The one who never lied to me. The one who didn't try to put me in a home so he could liquidate my life. I hung up before she could respond. She came to the house 2 days later, or rather, to where she thought the house still was. She stepped out of her car with purpose, umbrella snapping open, heels clicking up the driveway. But when she reached the porch, something stopped her. A woman opened the door. Not me. Not Gabriel. A woman in her 60s with gray hair and kind eyes. Can I help you? She asked. Julia blinked. This is my father's home. The woman shook her head gently. Not anymore. We just closed on it last week. Lovely man sold it to us. Said he was moving out of state. Julia's mouth moved, but nothing came out. She turned, hands trembling, and saw the note taped to the mailbox, her name written on the front in my handwriting. I saw her open it under the rain. Julia. The house is gone. The accounts are gone. The control is gone. But I'm still here, just no longer under your thumb. I'm not angry. Not even bitter. But I am done. You wanted power. You wanted silence. You got both, just not in the way you hoped. I've moved on. You should too. Dad. The final step came in the lawyer's office 1 week later. She showed up red-eyed, with a new lawyer beside her. I arrived with Gabriel. Mr. Halpern pulled out the revised will. Watertight. Dated. Witnessed. Julia's share reduced to a modest, undisputed percentage, just enough to prevent a legal fight, but no more than she'd earned. Gabriel was listed clearly, completely. She stood and shouted. Said I was being manipulated. That I was mentally declining. That this was elder abuse. Her lawyer sat silently. There was nothing he could argue. Because I had already been examined. Privately. By 2 doctors. Clean bill of cognitive health. Mr. Halpern slid 2 sealed envelopes across the desk. You can contest, he said calmly. But you'll lose. Everything is documented. And your petition for guardianship has been revoked as meritless. That's already on file with the state. She looked at me, not as a daughter looks at her father, but like a child looks at the candy jar when she's told it's empty. How could you do this to me? I didn't do this to you, I said. You did it for me. For months after Margaret died, silence felt like punishment, every tick of the clock, every creak of the floorboards, a reminder that the world had moved on without asking if I was ready. But now, as I sit on the back porch of my new house, with Gabriel beside me, coffee steaming between us and nothing urgent left to fight for, silence feels like peace. He does not talk just to fill the air. He listens. He notices small things, the way I like my eggs, that I read the paper front to back, that I still set out 2 mugs out of habit. He brings me tools when I'm working in the shed. He asks questions about Andrew, about Margaret, about Julia, not to pry, but to understand. He wants to know where he came from, and he's giving me the chance to be that place. Being a father to a child who wants nothing from you but truth. That's a gift I didn't know I'd ever have again. Some people spend their whole lives trying to raise a perfect child. I didn't raise Gabriel. But somehow, I ended up with a son who makes me feel like I still did something right.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help support the creation of more stories like this. Have a great day or evening.